And one of my students last year in an essay said something that I wanted to share with you today about spirituality, because, you know, although these kids aren't going to church, they are in their own way, in their own religious pathway. Not in a way that we might recognise. You know, they're not going to Sunday services on the whole, although my daughters do show up. I mean, for instance, my daughters love going to midnight mass, I suppose because it's, you know, Christmas time and also Easter Saturday. I suppose because they think it's different or something, you know, and it's, yeah, mysterious with the candles and the lights and things like that. But I think that in their own way they are involved in spiritual understandings. And I had an Anglican bishop come to me last year from the Melbourne St Paul's Cathedral, and he said, we're very interested in the Anglican Church and what you're doing. You seem to be deep listening to young people. I said, yes. I said, have you heard of the term Didiri? He said, no. And I thought, why am I not surprised? People in Melbourne don't know anything about Aboriginal culture. And, I mean, this wasn't a personal attack on him, but it's a general statement about Melbourne generally. And he said, oh, tell me about Didiri. So then I told him. And I feel the resonance of God in young people, even if they don't use God language. I do feel the presence of God in what they're saying, and I'm moved by that. And I'd like more of us to be moved by that too, because instead of church groups and hierarchy saying young people aren't coming to church, civilization's going to the dogs, you know, they're only concerned about themselves and their iPods and iPhones. And it's not true, actually. That's a very superficial condemnation of young people. My experience of them, and I get very close to them, having taught them now for virtually 30 years, more than, because I used to teach here in Sydney at the Macquarie University in North Ryde. I have the sense of the presence of God in them very strongly. It's just that it's not expressed in conventional ways. And so what we have to try and do in Christianity, and I think chaplains like yourselves are very intuitive about this, is try and think outside the box and try and understand, like the Aboriginal people, that the kingdom of God is all around us. It's not just, of course, inside the church. In the Catholic religion, the Catholic tradition, there was an old saying in Latin, which in English translates as, there is no salvation outside the church. And those who are Catholics in the room, and I seem to have only met Catholics. I think I draw them to myself. I was sitting with Catholics last night at dinner, and I was sitting with Catholics this morning at breakfast. And I said, hang on, isn't this the Uniting Church gig? And they said, yeah, but, you know, it's a very broad church, you know. And so it is. And that's great. And I commend the Uniting Church on being so open to people from so many different... I think denominationalism is something of the past. I really do. For instance, when I did teach the spirituality course prior to 2009, I often used to go around the groups. I had hundreds of students enrolling in these courses of their own volition. This spirituality course was actually a sitting duck for any dean wanting to make savings, because it wasn't connected with any discipline. It wasn't a core subject. It was simply an optional extra. And the last time I taught it, I had 210 students in it. Isn't that amazing? 210 students studying spirituality. And I used to go around at the start, the groups, the smaller tutorials, and say, now, what church background are you from? And of course, a lot of them weren't from any church background. So no, my parents are atheists. And they're worried because one student said to me, my dad was a graduate of La Trobe University when it started up in the 1960s. And La Trobe taught him that God was dead. That's the first thing La Trobe taught him. Through Nietzsche, through Marx. Marx, of course, referred to religion as the opium of the masses. And he developed a left-wing socialist view, became a feminist. And my dad brought us up to be good atheists. And this boy said in the group, he said, and my dad saw that I was reading the Bible at one point in my teenage life, because I wanted to find out about what you Christians, as he said, what yous Christians believe. and what your story is. And my dad was aghast. And he said, what have I done wrong with my parenting? I brought you up to be good atheists, and now you're going religious on me. And I said to the young student, well, that's your prerogative, you know. It's the prerogative of young people to rebel against their parents. And, you know, so we've got to get with this. I mean, the ball's back in our court as religious people. Young people are wanting to recover the memory of spirituality. And indeed, I think the memory of spirituality is religion and its background, its history, where it came from, its original sources, its scriptures. And I actually asked some of my students to read, of course, one of my favourite Gospels is the Gospel of John, because it speaks so strongly of the cosmic Christ, not just the historical person of Jesus, who is so, of course, very important, but also the cosmic Christ. That is to say, that aspect of Christ that's found everywhere through our experience, and indeed found in people who aren't professed Christians. I think the cosmic Christ is found everywhere. And this connects me with people like Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan friar in in America. John O'Donoghue, who unfortunately died recently, was trying to regenerate Celtic spirituality in his Catholic tradition. Thomas Merton was trying to reach into the heart of particularly Buddhism, and Thai Buddhism in particular, and find what spoke to him from that tradition. William Johnston, I've done a little bit of work with over the years. He was based in Tokyo, and he was working with Zen, the Zen tradition, and trying to connect Christian spirituality with Zen. Bede Griffiths, who I never got to meet, but I've always admired from afar, was working in India and trying to connect his Christian background with the foreground of Hindu spirituality